And one of the things is that, is visual language. And as it serves storytelling and as it serves the address to the audience and the viewer and engaging everybody emotionally and cognitively and all the rest of it. And so I'm interested to know how you have evolved in that sense and how your understanding of that and your execution of that has developed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, even from back in the days when sitting and listening to you in class, I remember you speaking about, how the soul is kind of tethered to style. And I think that was maybe the hardest thing in terms of like growing artistically, was trusting, I guess, not having that doubt when you have that gut instinct, because whatever that gut instinct is in a creative choice can only come from you. So I think that I was probably earlier on mimicking other people's styles because those worked, and that was like a catalog or a language that I understood. So I hadn't quite developed my voice yet.
Yeah.
I mean, I think probably always trying to develop the voice, but I think the biggest takeaway was early on was that story and style are symbiotic.
Yeah.
And when it's working the best visually, they're working together to support each other. So a lot of the television work that I started getting, was looking at a script, reading a script, but also seeing what the script was saying to me in terms of themes, thematically. And then if something sparked an idea, then I would start going down that road. So like on 20s, for example, it's a TV show. I did the pilot and most of the season. The first couple of pages, the character goes to see this throwback 50s Hollywood movie. And because the character made that choice, a lot of that TV show ended up tonally living in this pastiche to old Hollywood, but with these new faces in Los Angeles. And that informed like everything. But it was inspired by the character's choice, I guess I would say. So I think that's probably a good example of how style and story became symbiotic.
I think already, there are many questions as regards what you're saying. I mean, I love what you're saying, but a lot of people get confused between grammar, language, style, and they think that of style as something that is cosmetic. It's something that is to make things glossy, or it's to make things, smooth or sort of spectacular. And everything you're saying is that no, it's rooted, its foundations are much, much deeper. That when it's merely that, it's just a confection. But if it grows organically out of the soul of the piece, out of the story, the character, the themes, the world of it, then it's much, much more than a kind of veneer.
Yeah. I think that it's like an easy reaction to say, well, there's too much style or style over substance. That's a common refrain.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree, but at the same time, I do disagree, because if you have story with great substance, say, and you're watching a story, but there's no point of view, then there's something that lacks like a connection to the viewer. At that point, you can have an algorithm direct television, right? Where that's kind of what happens to a lot of like the network kind of shows, where everyone knows that you need an establishing shot, a medium, a close up, shot, reverse shot. So at that point, you're just letting the crew kind of dictate what happens, or on a set.
This is how, when I was a first AD with BBC Films and Drama, and afterwards when I was a first AD, that's how I thought. I thought in terms of grammar. I would just break down the scene, establishing shot, a profile two, maybe over the shoulder, singles, reverses, And it wasn't thinking in terms of telling the story. It wasn't thinking in terms of communicating emotion.
Yeah.
You know, it's as if there is, you know, the events of the fiction are sort of set in stone, and but they're not. I mean, they only exist insofar as they're seen, and so the way they're seen helps to create what they actually are.
Yeah. I mean, the dream is to elevate what's there. Um, and I think when style is coming from you, like in a singular way, then suddenly everything is elevated. Because if a character's in a scene and they're going through whatever a breakup, something interior is happening with them, you know, there's a million places you can put a camera to cover it, but or to tell that story. But once you start, I guess, I'll frame it this way. Once I started like doing it over and over and over with these scenes, I start to notice like, oh, I keep doing this thing to tell this kind of story.
Right.
It might be use of slow motion. It might be the way the blocking happens, or a sequence that I want to move the camera in, and it's like I found myself repeating camera moves or effects, and I think that kind of speaks to, and not in a way that I'm like, it's like a crutch,
Yeah.
phoning it in,
Yeah.
but when it
Yeah.
is, it's like it's an instinct that kicks in that's I guess rewarding, because like you suddenly you're like in a state of mind that's like we're like the flow state where it's like, oh, this is what I want to do, not what I should do. It's just, it is. You know, it's not right or wrong, it just is.
So, I mean, do you come with an approach, and then do you challenge yourself and find out? I mean, does that actually stand scrutiny? I mean, do you need to formulate something and then subvert it, maybe, or go deeper than that, or do you just find now that you find the right way to shoot and cut something?
I usually always have an approach, like an overall approach, where there's some system in place, such as with this character, I'm going to shoot this character more military-esque, locked off, very clean, very dolly driven, very like stark line, center punch. And then over the course of the season, she's going to break down, so it will devolve into more handheld.
Wow.
More handheld, frenetic.
Less symmetrical compositions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like that was an approach that I had on the last show I did, but what I also found in terms of subverting that, where sometimes you're sitting there and you're watching it, and you're like, I know that I said this is what I should do in terms of like the arc of the camera language of the character, but it just doesn't work for that moment.
Right.
So there's always outliers. I guess is what I learned, the lesson I learned there, where it's like you can't say for 100% sure this is what's going to happen. You can only say this is the idea, the approach, and here are like the 5 beats throughout the story arc. For this, in this instance, it was 8 episodes. So it was like in episode 3 this happens, in episode 6 this happens. So those are like the goalposts. And if we can work to keep a language that's consistent and then hit those things, then that's kind of like it's kind of what just happens. Because in the moment, I think, because you're at the monitor and you're basically judging if something is honest or, being present. Sometimes it just, you have to throw it all out the window, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I always come back to this in most of these conversations I'm having. And I find it in my own work. I mean, I'm writing about filmmaking. I'm not writing fiction at the moment. But on the one hand, you have intention. And it's good to have that clear intention and to have thought about it. But on the other hand, you have a journey of discovery. And these things seem mutually contradictory, but they have to work together. You always have to be free to step aside from your intention to discover something that will actually then feed back into your intention.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think most things like that are paradoxical.
Yeah.
And that's usually the right answer, is that it should be uncomfortable, because usually that abject, like, it has to be this, is never is never the solution. The solutions are always far more complex, because dealing with emotion, which means the way, you might have something in your mind, and then suddenly the actor makes a choice, and you're like, oh, in this moment, I just saw that, and it made me feel something. So I think we should actually shoot it this way to support that choice. So I think the ability to, I guess, improvise, allow yourself to be.
Those really good moments actually are not so much reassuring as surprising.
Yeah.
Now, another thing I wanted to ask you about is, and I forget who said it, I think it was Kiarostami or somebody, but you don't consider each shot in and of itself. I mean, it has to be related to all the shots in the rest of the scene, in the rest of the act, on the rest of the episode or the movie or whatever. How do you go about that?
Ooh.
I mean, you have to have a visual memory of your whole sort of visual plan, don't you?
Yeah. For me, I actually take a lot of time to shot list and beat and look at the bigger picture of every transition from scene to scene. So whether it be, it's really, for me, I approach it in terms of pace. Should this scene to this scene be like staccato, or should it be
legato?
Like, it's like, how should the rhythm and pace feel?
Yeah.
The same way, in horror movies, you have, if you want someone to cry, right, and you make them laugh first, like the big turns. Turns are always like what you're going for to keep an audience, I guess, on the edge of their seat, as like these are the characters' intentions, and then let's subvert them. So even the way you play with emotion in terms of that is the same way, I guess.
Well, if you want something to have a particular emotional impact, you want to give the opposite impact just before.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think that in terms of like the shot selection from sequence to sequence, exactly what you just said is like, well, I know that this moment has to hit an audience. That means the scene leading up to it, I might have 10 shots to cover something, and then the big emotional moment, I'll have one angle, I'll have two angles, because I just want to sit there, not cut away.
Right.
And so
maybe even let the actor possess the frame.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Another really interesting point you make, it's a wonderful point, is the notion of rhythm and energy. I often talk about the flow of energy in a shot. Now, if you're thinking grammatically, you're thinking of these static frames like it's in a storyboard, right? But that doesn't give you much of a sense of this movement, does it? Of time passing and movement and energy. which is very much a part of visual language and seems to be rarely discussed, I think.
Yeah, the um, the energy of a scene. I mean, and it's like the in between moments, I guess I would say, of a performance.
Mm.
So with some comedy that I've worked on, there'll be a scripted. The script will say, she picks up the phone and gets a call from mom and says hello. Um, I remember being on set, and I had set up this like 50-foot, steady cam shot where the phone rings and we fly across the street and then land on the character right before she picks up the phone and says hello. And it's just her mom. Like that's not even, but so I remember the writer, creator, showrunner is like, Justin, like, what are you doing? I don't understand. I was like, I'm trying to get a laugh before the laugh,
Right.
because I know that in the language of cinema, like people are used to a big push. It means something really important is going to happen.
Really significant.
Really, pay
Yeah.
attention. This is going to blow your mind.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm trying to go for like a fake out, like a pump fake, like nothing happens, and that's the joke. There's nothing
Right.
important about this at all, and that's why I want to do this, because it was like a ridiculous setup, and it made we did it, and we made the cut, and I put over,
and it works.
it works, and people thought it was funny, but that wasn't an intention by the writer or
Right.
the actor or the edit. Like that was a pure stylistic choice.
Well, I would say linguistic, visually,
Right.
linguistic choice, and kind of subversive. The other thing is, it's interesting, isn't it? Most people understand visual language, but they don't understand they understand it. I mean, they wouldn't have laughed at this if they didn't deep down understand it. But they couldn't have explained it in the way that you're explaining it, which is great. I mean, that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's also like talking about energy and flow too. What I find interesting about the last 10 years of doing this is I wasn't even aware, like there's more tools at your disposal suddenly as you keep working at the craft, right? Like that parable, is it like if a fish is like swimming downstream, two younger fish are going the other way, and the older fish is like, how's the water today? And the younger fish say, what's water? I think it was David Foster Wallace. But I love that because you're not aware of your condition until someone points it out. And I think like as a creator on like a film set, I was never even thinking about crane shots or, what like when I get to huge sets now, like the possibilities, like the tools you have on the truck are way more than what I had when I was even
a student.
A student or doing my first independent feature, where it's like, well, this is going to be handheld because I have no choice. Like that's it. So how can I make the best thing in this language? But then suddenly you start getting new words and your vocabulary grows, and now you're like, whoa, let me experiment with this. And so I think I've made mistakes or like gotten too excited and then put some energy that didn't have to be there when it could have just lived on its own. But I think that's another part of like in terms of like growing, like you're just constantly, taking in, the dictionary starts to get bigger, and then it starts to inspire other ideas or other things you could subvert, for like moments. How do I put a highlighter over like this word in the story? It's like, well, you could use this, this bolt camera machine where it can move from here to here in 0.1 second. And that suddenly you're like, wait, it might not be right for this, but now I have another thing in the back of my mind, another tool in the toolbox to consider.
Yeah, so even if you don't execute an idea, if you don't use it in the particular moment, it's there. You thought of it, and you can use it later on in some other circumstance.
Yeah, it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Justin. We've had our 20 minutes, and of course this could go on for 20 hours, really, because you're so interesting.
It's already over?
It's already over. So,
What?
yeah. So
I feel like we just started.
I know. Well, we have. I mean, we've always just started. That's the way it is. That's the way it should be, I think. Anyhow.
It should. Yeah, I'm restarting like every day.
So thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope that you watch it afterwards. I'll save this on Instagram so everybody can see it. And I'd love to see you in person sometime, Justin, in the next decade or something. Maybe that could happen. But you're so busy, but it will be lovely to see you.